Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind Podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series, Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. In this series, titled The Tools to 10 Million, Michael Sutton of Kind Home Painting Company will be discussing professional tools to enable growth to $10 million. It is a 5-part series. In episode 1, Michael discussed the professionals who supported his growth and how you can find your own support network. In episode 2, this episode, Michael will cover the books that have empowered his growth to date. In episode 3, Michael will deep dive into the key employees he could not do without. In episode 4, Michael will lay out the numbers that make his business thrive. And in episode 5, the final episode, Michael will break down the real challenges of entrepreneurship and how to overcome those. If you want to ask Michael questions related to anything in this podcast series, you can do so in our exclusive Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook. Just search for Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook and request to join the group. Or type in the URL facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. Again, that URL is facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. There you can ask Mike questions directly by tagging him with your question, so you can see how anything discussed here applies to your particular painting company. Michael, welcome back, man.
Welcome, Brandon. How are you?
Doing well, brother. Doing well. Always enjoy filming with you. We always end up chatting it up for 20 plus minutes before we start. Warms us up, but I enjoy it, man. I allocate extra time for our podcast recordings.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've always been a little long-winded. So.
Oh no, I like talking with you, Mike. So, books. Last episode, you walked us through some pretty crazy stuff. I told you it had me thinking, my wheels turned. I spent the weekend kind of thinking about my personal network and where I could potentially improve. Now we're diving into books that really empowered you in business and helped you grow the company that you have.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to talk about it. And reading and listening to books has been a really powerful thing for my professional career over the last 15 years. Hands down, it's been the largest impact that, I can share with anyone if you put in the time. And it can bring me as much value as it can you or anyone else. So, I'm happy to share and chat about them.
And what I'm extremely excited about is I thought you were going to come into this episode and like, okay, here's 20 books. We got the whole arsenal of everything from, you could want in business or marketing, operations, this, that. We're going to cover everything. You came in only with a handful. So we're only going to be talking about 4 or 5 books. We're going to be talking about this for probably close to an hour. And you're going to kind of dive deep into this. That's what I like.
Hopefully. And if we need to talk about 20 because we run out of things to say, I've got a few more.
We'll just throw them all out there. We'll just totally scrap the initial idea and we'll just data dump.
No. And I think even that right there is a representation of how a lot of people use or misuse literature. Probably read 30 to 50 books a year or listen to, but you can't apply all those books. And how many times do you read a book and you go, well, that was neat. Lots of good information. You set it down and you never think about it again.
Yeah. Yeah. There is something to that. So it still kind of can unlock your brain, get the creativity, but there's also maybe limited benefit if you do that just all the time, but you never super implement anything.
Absolutely. And I fight that with salespeople on my team, with production people on my team, as I ask and encourage people to read content. They say, oh, I already know that. I've already heard that. No, it's not about just hearing it once, or it's not that you are. Sometimes you can already know something and still get benefit from re-listening or rereading, because it's about bringing it to the front of mind. It's about exercising the thought process that goes into it. It's about like making that recall happen quicker when you need that information. But yes, it is different than applying every word and going back to it again and
Sure.
again.
Yeah, and I'm always looking for trends of highly successful people, right? And I try to personally model myself after that when I can, because there are patterns you can see. And one of the patterns I've identified with top performers, with successful entrepreneurs, is they like to learn. They have a hunger for learning and for self-growth. And they almost all, without fail, actively like to read. That does audiobooks counts, right? But what's important is they absorb the content and they're trying to improve. People listening to this, well,
Mhm.
they are absorbing content. They are that kind of they're already that kind of business owner.
Absolutely.
So let's get into it, man. What's book number one?
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna completely go off track already.
Mike, the plan's already off track.
So I'll share the very first book that made like a professional impact. And it's not the book that we were talking about, but it was when I first started selling paint jobs before I owned my own company years before, and I only had to focus on sales. I was introduced to a book by Brian Tracy called The Psychology of Sales.
Yep.
And I listened to that book on repeat. Somebody actually gave me the CD, one CD of it. It wasn't the full collection, but for whatever reason, he had one burned copy of it that he gave to me.
You're like an expert in 2 chapters.
Yeah, it was literally a partial book, and I listened to that thing on repeat for 4 or 5 months, almost every single time I got into the car. And he talks about Automobile University, and it started kind of this progression of sales training that I put myself through, that went through all the old greats: Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, just these like classic sales gurus that talk about the impact of reading. And every one of them said, if you want to be in the top 5% of salespeople, if you want to be one of the best with your company, listen to books every time you get in your car. And I said, well, okay, I guess there's got to be something to this. If every one of these salespeople that I listened to said the same thing. So I made a commitment to turn my radio off, and I only listened to books when I got in my car for 6 years.
Wow.
And it started with Brian Tracy's Psychology of Sales. Today, it's the thing I miss the most about being in the field. And I don't personally spend my days doing estimates anymore. So I'm not driving between appointments. I don't manage paint projects. I'm not doing much quality control. So very rarely do I have reasons to go out and be in the field and meet with clients. And that's what I feel like I've lost the most of, is the time spent listening and the time growing through books and podcasts.
That's interesting.
But
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I mean I was just commenting that otherwise downtime. And I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast are actually in a similar situation where they're driving or some people painting, and listening to it. But yeah, there's something very important and empowering about utilizing otherwise considered downtime or kind of wasted time. And now you have this situation where you have to work to intentionally carve out the time because it's not already built into your schedule.
It's 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Find 2 hours in a day when your entire day was meetings and appointments and back-to-back conversations.
Because there's something else you could always be doing, and it's hard to say, oh no, this is my 2 hour, but it almost feels wrong. It almost feels unproductive, even though it's actually super. Like, oh, what do you mean you're not going to work from 10 to 12? We're supposed to have this meeting. Oh no, you're just going to read from 10 to 12.
Yeah, this is my reading time.
Right.
Do not disturb.
Do not disturb. Yeah. Got a
No.
scotch and you're in your leather armchair.
Yeah, I wish. And I share that because the impact that I think the books make, and I think I said this last time on the podcast, was you're the same person tomorrow as you were today, minus the things you ate, the conversations you had, and the books you've read. And if you're not consuming something positive, you're not going to grow. But the first one we had discussed, and probably hands down the largest impact on our business up to this point, was a book called Traction by Gino Wickman. And I've heard a lot of people starting to talk about it and apply it. And I will be the first to say that it has very much become our business Bible. And we started self-implementing Traction at the end of 2019. We were wrapping up our second year. And, you had asked me, how did those books, how did you find certain ones of these? And this was a book that came through my board. Somebody on my board had mentioned it. Somebody on Tommy Mello's podcast had mentioned it. Someone, my CFO, had mentioned it. And I said, what are all these people mentioning a book? I've got to just listen. And it was a book that I listened to, finished it, immediately hit play again, listened to it a second time and said, I think I'm going to need the paper copy.
Gotta mark this thing up.
Yeah. Bought it, read it, and then I said, okay, I think we're going to do it. And for a company without a leadership team at that time, basically I was managing 17 or 18 people.
That sounds fun.
And the foundation of what EOS and Traction says is about letting go of the vine and giving the ability to other people to step into leadership and management. And it really defines how do you build the system of management within a company. And I kind of read it, selected the people who I thought would be, who would benefit from it, who could help me and step into those leadership positions, asked all of them to read the book. And as they completed them, I would ask them to join the leadership team.
And that's cool. So people basically got kind of promoted. You built a leadership team from internal team members based on this book.
Yes.
That's definitely a growth in the company.
And it's every person on our company who has stepped into a leadership role all started by reading the book. Our sales manager, our marketing director, our production manager, the lady who runs our call center, and my wife, who would be kind of operations manager, director of everything.
Make sure it all is working.
Yes. And honestly, EOS has been a difficult thing to do. Are you familiar with it?
I am. And I know that there's self-implementation. We're actually working on it ourselves at Painter Marketing Pros. I've read the book, I think 3 times now. There's the self-implementation, or you can actually hire an implementer, right, to come in and do this for you. Why'd you guys select to implement it yourselves?
Probably 2 reasons. Probably arrogance and probably brokenness.
You always seem so arrogant, Mike. That's the one thing that, except not.
No, financially, when you're a small company and you're trying to bootstrap,
it's expensive.
$5,000, $10,000, $20,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
And when you have a playbook right in front of you.
Yeah.
And that's what, EOS does in Traction so well, is that they give you the system. So we still have weekly leadership team meetings. And in the book, it talks about identify, discuss, solve. And that at every leadership meeting, you should be bringing to the table issues. And the objective is to solve those issues within a 1-hour meeting on a weekly basis. And the topic of our last one, the issue for our last leadership meeting, was solving issues.
It sounds redundant, but that's actually a big problem in a lot of companies. What's the process for solving our problems?
Yeah. And this is 3.5 years into doing it. And people started saying, well, how do we want to do our IDS? How should we bring issues? And I said, guys, before everyone goes and makes recommendations on how we should submit our issues, will people reread pages 135 to 147 that tell you exactly how to do this? We model each of our quarterly meetings off of it. And this was something really powerful for my team just 2 weeks ago as we did our first quarterly. It says human beings operate on 90-day cycles, and you can set a clear path and a goal, And if you wait 90 days, you're going to be off track, almost guaranteed.
Wow.
Momentum starts to die down after 90 days. And that's why you do quarterly meetings, to bring people back on track, to reset your focus, to re-energize and rejuvenate. And that's what that 90-day cycle's for. Well, it's similar to what you and I were talking about, just before we got started, was every 30 days you take a reset.
Yep.
People have to have those resets, those refocuses. And it's incredible that Gino has given you that playbook for how frequently you have to reset. How do you do it as a team? How do you get your leadership team to be excited again and back into it after 90 days of getting your butt kicked?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're growing, you usually are getting your butt kicked. So what Michael was referring to there, I have a mandated refresh once a month. I'm in the Army National Guard. So I get yanked by the collar, pulled out of my life, and get to do some nice introspection for a little while monthly. It's difficult, but it also is incredibly helpful. So these refreshes, they're valuable, man. And I know you kind of self-implement some of this, right? These refreshes. What do you do?
In my personal life?
Yeah.
Oh
I
man.
can get you signed up in the Guard, man. We can go do this together.
They wouldn't want me. I'm too old and broken.
Oh, okay.
I was hobbling in today, just from walking through the garage.
Well, that Christmas light, man, I could have taken down the most fit of athletes. You know that.
It doesn't take much.
Don't beat yourself up over that.
Yeah. I don't have a lot of like premeditated resets in there, other than what this industry typically does for painters. For a lot of people, there's a seasonality to painting.
Yeah.
Which automatically gives you a time to kind of clean house once a year and slow down and focus on getting everything back together the way it should be. For us in Colorado, we have slower winters. So pretty much December, January is going to be a highly reduced workload as far as work or as far as painting goes, which means you can kind of focus on the other components of business, the budgets, the plans, the projections, the marketing strategies. And there's every year we give time for our employees to reset. Go on your trip, take a month off. Here's 30 days off. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
We look forward to that reset all fall, and we kind of celebrate it all spring. And that reset that we give everyone in the companies starts coming to front of mind about July, August. People start saying, man, I can't wait for my 30 days off. I'm really excited. So that's one of the things that we've built into our business.
So does everyone get 30 days off, or how does that work?
A minimum of 2 weeks for everyone. A lot of people are kind of in that 30-day period.
And you guys just kind of, I mean, obviously the company hasn't shut down for 30 days. So you guys just space out, I guess, who takes what time.
Yeah. If you have 6 project managers and I only need 2 of them.
Yeah.
We can give some people a little bit extra time. And then as they're back, give a little bit of time for someone else. So
that's so great, because that's another trend that I've seen amongst, most successful people is they find what would typically be considered bad or a challenge, and they make it work to their advantage. And that's something I've heard from a select few painting company owners that, hey, winter, the slow season is really great because it lets us do X, Y, or Z. The common refrain is, oh, seasonality. And obviously, yeah, it's scary, right? It's scary. Like a reduction in business isn't usually a good thing, but you're like, oh, can't keep our painters busy. We're worried. That this is definitely not to reduce the importance of that, but I think it's really great that you find the opportunity there, and that people are almost looking forward to, okay, there's not going to be quite as much work because we're in Colorado and the exterior season's got to shut down. But it gives us such a cool opportunity to refresh personally. And then also, what's broken in the business? What didn't really work that well this year? What do we need to go in and fix? So prior to ramping up in the spring, we're ready to go.
Yeah. And it's, one of the things I've struggled with is that I've created the time and space for people within the team. For me, it's a little stressful. It tends to be one of
All the
the,
problems are your problems, brother.
uh, and making sure that I frame that correctly, because it is supposed to be a time of rejuvenation for people on the team. And even if, I'm concerned that cash flow, or
Sure.
now I have to do taxes, or, whatever falls on my plate, to make sure that you're giving space for other people to celebrate and win in there, even if it is a little bit more difficult in January than it is
Yeah.
July.
Yeah.
So
Business ownership is not without its burdens,
yeah,
for sure. So, okay. So you serving traction, started, you decided to self-implement EOS,
yeah,
because you felt capable of doing it, and financially it's a lot to hire an implementer to come in. One of the first things it seems like you did, one of the first major things, is you found internal team members, and you essentially gave them the opportunity to rise to the occasion and become leaders within your company. What are some of the other big changes that you made, and maybe kind of the order in what you made them through that book?
yeah. One of the things it talks about is a 10-year vision, and working on a 10-year cycle and a 3-year cycle when it comes to goal setting has been very powerful us. Very powerful for us. And it's really realizing how far out and how big what you're trying to do is. Um, and I would say when I first started the business, it was difficult to put a 10-year goal in place.
Seems
And
like an eternity when you're starting a
it
company.
feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
Uh, and now it's one of the most exciting moments every year is when we look at our 10-year vision and say, are we sticking with it? Are we still on track for it? Does it need to be reset? And in traction, it doesn't say to reset your 10-year every 10 years, which is unique. So we've had the same 10-year goal for several years now, 3 years. Before you reset it. And you make sure that that 10-year goal is still relevant. And ours is to give back $1 million in economic resources to developing kind homes. I would say a kind home is a well-maintained, safe place that is abuse and addiction free, where you can raise a healthy family. And we made a commitment on day one to give 10% of our profits back for what we called the Kind Home Community Outreach Program. And that being our 10-year goal, what's the impact that you can make locally within a community as you grow and you give back to the community? That's been the most rewarding and exciting thing that we've put into place from traction,
Man,
as
what a
well
goal.
as the management.
What a goal. So and I know you and I kind of like to geek out on the numbers. We're both very data analytics driven. And so if you're saying, okay, you want to give $1 million per year to this, obviously that is a big number, right? To a cause, it can make a big difference in people's lives, in your community. Then because okay, we're going to give 10% of our profits, you can essentially back into how big this company needs to be, right? How much revenue you need to be doing, how many team members you have, and essentially you can chart a business course for what is really a value driven initiative.
Yeah, 100%. And at one point, we had a 10-year goal that was a big revenue number.
Mhm.
And it was during an annual retreat where we realized, like, what's the point of having a big number for us?
Yeah.
What's it for us? Who cares? Like, it's if you're going to set a big goal, set it around like, what's the impact? What's that mean for the other people? What's it mean for the community for you to reach a certain size?
Yeah. And that's going to probably be much more motivating for the team, as opposed to, hey, if we make a bunch of money, then, Michael can make more money, and then that's our goal is achieved.
Yep.
It's a lot more powerful.
And it's to put a 10-year goal on a wall so that anytime somebody walks into it, they see a 10-year goal and where the company's going. Uh, It didn't feel as good when it was just a big revenue number.
Yeah.
You switch it to what you've given back, and suddenly the team got excited about it. It's something that people get excited about when we're interviewing and hiring. It's something that the leadership team and the management team feels connected to. And truly, I think the 10-year vision was one of the most powerful things out of traction. But it goes on and on as far as the value. I couldn't imagine starting over or trying to do this again without somebody introducing that book to me. And I read it several times every year.
So if you're listening and you have not read Traction or listened to the audiobook, check it out. Right. It is. Yeah. It's one of the, and I'm always almost a little resistant when people talk about the same thing over and over again, because I think sometimes in industries, the painting industry, a lot of people listen to this podcast are involved in the PCA. There can be sort of fads almost, right? Like everyone gets on a certain bandwagon. I see it in our marketing groups that we're a part of, the kind of the shiny object. Oh, it's cool to do this, implement this. So we're all going to do it and then post on social media about how we do it. But Traction is, I guess it could be considered a little bit, of a thing, right? People want to show that they're doing it, but there's a reason. There's a reason that people are doing it. And the reason we're implementing it at Painter Marketing Pros. It's not something we publicize or go try to be cool about. It's because it actually works. It's actually really, really solid. So if you've seen it and you've been kind of wondering, check it out.
Yeah.
Try it. You have anything else to add with Traction right now?
No.
I know you had given me 4 or 5 books.
Yeah.
And which you already messed up, Michael, because you started with another one, but we'll save that till after the recording. We can talk about that. But the book 2 you had given me, I want to skip it for right now, because I want to actually go to book 3, because based on this goal that you were talking about and kind of like how you've established this company, let's go into the some of the Simon Sinek stuff that you were talking about.
Yeah. Simon Sinek, Start with Why. It's a powerful book, but it also comes in bite-sized chunks. And he has a pod or a TED Talk that I think has been viewed close to 30 million times. It's 15 minutes long. I encourage all of our employees to watch it. I encourage people as we're interviewing to watch it. And it comes down to, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it's refocusing the intention of business from what you provide to why you provide it. For us, our goal is to make a positive impact within our community. It's the Kind Home Community Outreach Program. It's the 10 houses that we painted for free last year. I exaggerated, it was 7. 7 houses that we did for families in need that were nominated by our own clients who said, they can't afford to paint a house, but they need it.
Yeah.
It's the ability to give back to our team. One of the things we do is we do a toy drive every year. And the first thing we do is invite all of our painters in to grab toys for their families and their extended families before we take toys to the donation place. And that's something last year we gave away about 500 toys.
That's a lot of toys.
I had no idea how much space 500 toys was.
I can't imagine. That's a lot. Like a huge warehouse of toys.
Well, it took 2 offices.
Man, just stacking. Well, some toys are sizable, man. Some are small, but some are actually pretty big.
And who knew that Walmart doesn't like for you to come in and buy like 300 toys at once?
Was that kind of an awkward experience? Never done that.
No, it's incredible. We had, anyone from the team who could do it, go and do it. But I'll tell you, the cashiers were not happy.
Oh yeah, no. Hey, this lane's going to be blocked for probably the next 30 minutes.
You're a cashier. I mean, what's the difference between us or somebody else?
Yeah, there's something mental about spending that long on one person versus just a ton of people. I don't know.
Yeah. That being said, he talks about identifying a why within each of ourselves. So each person has their own why. And, I've read the book for 10 years that I've referenced it, listened to the TED Talk over and over again, told hundreds of people about Start With Why. And then I started questioning, do I even know what my own why is? Why did I start this company? Why am I doing what I'm doing today? Running a business is not necessarily easy. Oftentimes you end up working more hours than you could imagine. Oftentimes there's less financial reward than you expect.
It's not the easy road, for sure.
It is not the easy road. You might think it would be. And I'm starting to ask myself, why? Why am I doing this? Is this really what I should be doing or what I wanted to do? Or does this even align with what I was put on this earth for? And I read Find Your Why, and he writes, just like traction, a step-by-step process to follow to identify your why. And after I read the book in something like May of last year, the Find Your Why, I said, I'm going to do this. And the first thing it says is you need to have a facilitator who's going to help you find your why. And it needs to be somebody who will spend a couple days with you, who will listen to you talk for a couple days, not have a ton to say, but have a lot of questions to ask. And Simon lays out this path of going through your life and identifying moments within your life that you can recall very well. Memories that you can see, memories that you can hear from your childhood, from your teenage years, from at any point in your life. And you're supposed to share those memories with someone. But that person can't judge you. They can't have heard all these stories before. And they have to be genuinely curious with them. And you're supposed to go away to a place where there's no distraction and you can just openly talk through things that you've experienced within your life. And once you've put all these stories onto paper, he says, you're going to identify the golden thread that ties all of these things together. And that thread, the commonality between those stories that you bring up and how you discuss them, is where you'll find your why.
The facilitator identifies that?
They help you discuss commonalities.
Are they like, an EOS, are they like a certified facilitator, or what is this?
You can hire Simon's team to do that.
Okay.
Or he gives you a book that tells you exactly how. Yet
What's
again,
that book called?
Find Your Why.
Find Your Why. Okay.
And his main book is called Start With Why. That's the business book that everyone references. That's the TED Talk. And then he wrote a secondary book called Find Your Why to tell you how to actually identify what your why is.
So that part's the roadmap to actually achieving the Start With Why.
Yes, absolutely. And I identified somebody on my team. He was a younger gentleman, very close friend of mine, to be my facilitator. I went to Seattle for 3 days, and I took 2 days to work through exactly his outline for how to do it. And it was one of the most powerful weekends that I've had on my own ever.
Now, when you were doing this, you were talking about childhood experiences. I assume, any kind of like trauma or life-changing things may have come up. I mean, this sounds heavy, man. A lot of people have a hard time opening up even to, professionals, right? Like therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, that kind of stuff. How do you, if you're listening to this, you're like, well, that sounds really powerful. There's nobody I'm going to tell this stuff to. There's not a chance I'm going to go. What would you recommend in that case?
To be patient and to take your time. Like I said, I probably first read it in May, maybe April. And I didn't actually identify a facilitator until July, June. I talked to a couple people about it. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this weird thing. would you maybe consider doing this with me? And make sure that you're comfortable with it. And so many things in life, you get out of it what you put into it.
Yeah.
Take the time and do the work ahead of time so that it's powerful and beneficial. And you're supposed to write down 15 stories or something from your early years that you can recall that you're going to share. And I think we ended up doing 30 or 40. But I had 15 written down. And a good facilitator, they ask a story and then they say, well, how did it feel when you were going through that? How did it feel when you were, delivering a sermon at your grandfather's funeral? My grandfather was a pastor, and I did, his funeral when I was 21, and it was a powerful thing for me to stand at his church in front of his congregation.
Wow.
But it's the feelings that you had while you were doing it, feelings after. It was emotionally challenging, and it's also, you don't just have to focus on trauma.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be a super negative, painful thing.
Yeah. Moving or changing schools or meeting a person or something that happened with your family, a vacation that you went on, and you start to see, wow, these are the pieces that I remember with it. And it's in those memories that you start to hear what your why is.
That's so interesting. Does the book Find Your Why, does it talk about or give kind of a plan for actually finding a good facilitator, what that person looks like?
Yeah, several chapters of it.
That's interesting. And if you don't have anyone, but you have the financial means, then you can actually hire Simon and his team to help you with this.
Yes. And you know how the universe does these unique things?
Universe is weird, man.
2 days before I was going, I interviewed somebody who had actually gone through Simon's course.
Wow.
Done the Find Your Why.
I had never even heard of that book, The Find Your Why. So I can't imagine it's, tons and tons and tons of people have actually done it.
Mm-hmm. And 2 days before I went, I met somebody. The conversation turned into this where I said, yeah, I'm going to Seattle. I'm going to do this weird book thing. And she's like, oh, what book? Simon Sinek, Find Your Way. Oh my God, I did actually a leadership retreat where we did this.
That is cool. I assume you hired her. I hope you hired her.
No.
Oh, bummer. That's okay. Universe is weird.
Universe
is weird.
And is it because you're listening that it came up? Are there more red cars on the road after you buy a red truck? Because you bought the red truck.
Sure.
Or is it
seeing them all? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Stop playing mind games on me. Stop playing mind games on me, Mike. You can't keep like lingering in here after these podcast episodes, man.
No.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly powerful. I've read Start With Why a couple of times. It's actually something I've struggled with though, is okay. Start with why. You can sit down, you can think, kind of meditate on it. But I always find it really, really helpful, more of kind of step-by-step building block approach. I think it's why people like this podcast is I try to take it from theory to how do you actually do what the heck people are talking about. There's so much theory, do this as a business owner, do that as a business owner, make sure you give back, and then you'll all of a sudden magically have this really big company that everyone loves. How do you actually do that? Like, get it down to kind of brass tacks. So this Find Your Why, I'm extremely excited to read that book.
I hope that it has meaning for you. And if you do the exercise, it's always fun to talk about yourself. It'll be fun.
Yeah. We'll have another podcast. You can come back later in the year and we can do like a flip interview. Be like,
okay.
All right, how did Mike Sutton change Brandon's life with all of his podcast episodes?
No.
I love it, man. Okay. You want to circle back to number 2? The one we skipped, leapfrogged? Second book? They ask.
Yeah. And honestly, after implementing traction, well, there was a little bit of a gap in our business and there was a marketing hole. And I know people talk a lot about marketing and how do you do it well.
I hate marketing, man. We'll get this done and we'll just move on.
Yeah. That's fair. Marketing's difficult, and there's lots of books on marketing, and I've read a ton of them. But I've only read one book on marketing where I said, "Wow, I need everyone in my company to read this, and I want to start applying it today." Which was "They Ask You Answer" by Marcus Sheridan, which has everything to do with outbound marketing, or excuse me, inbound marketing. It's trying to get your phone to ring rather than you calling them, trying to get them to call you. And it's about creating content and answering questions that people have. They ask, you answer. And it has been a foundation for how we've built our website since 2020. So we spent the last 3.5 years dedicated to making sure that we were putting helpful answers to as many questions as we could on our website, in our content for our clients, whether you work with us or not. It's a primary component to every one of our estimates. So that when we meet with a client, it's not necessarily about just winning the business, but it's about educating the client on what to expect when getting a professional house painting project completed, when hiring a painter, when choosing what product you're going to put on your house. What's the difference between all these Sherwin-Williams products and why do they matter? So it's focusing our energy from trying to get from our clients to what do we have to give to them, whether they work with us or not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a super, super powerful strategy. So one of the things we've started implementing with some of the companies we work with is actually Facebook group monitoring. So a lot of places obviously have these local groups on Facebook that kind of your neighbors, right, a neighborhood, and provide different referrals, recommendations, and a really key sort of grassroots guerrilla marketing strategy for a lot of painting companies is to be in these groups, right? Be hearing what people are saying. And so when you can actually set up your software, you can actually monitor for certain words, right? Like painting company, recommended painter, things like that. And you can actually get alerted when this stuff comes up. And when it comes up, you can see oftentimes people are asking for referrals and references. And there's a whole strategy around that to actually drum up business for you. But another time people are just asking questions in general about painting, right? And you can also go on to Google. There's tools to actually figure out commonly searched questions, and then you add FAQs to your question. So this whole they ask you answer, what do people want to know? And then tuning in. The internet is a absolute gold mine of information, and you can know exactly what questions they have, who to target, how to target them in ways that cost very little if you implement this. So that's super powerful.
Wow. I didn't in order I have so many questions about a tool like that. And I'm just listening to like, wait a second. This thing will monitor and listen to all the groups so that you don't have to pay 100% attention to all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll connect. I might share it's something we're a little bit in beta in, but so far it's working really, really well. So
Yeah.
I don't want to fully go into it. But I will tell you that so far the results are very good. So yeah, you can essentially you can monitor for these keywords. I mean, there's all kinds of software that you can layer on top of Facebook. You can add Google Chrome extensions on Google. The marketing world is extremely complex, extremely technical, but there are a lot of almost unfair solutions that you can use if you know what you're doing. So the other painting companies maybe trying to manually go in and scroll these groups, and how many groups are there? You should be in a lot of them, right? So to actually have someone scrolling every day and then try to get back to them in a timely manner becomes almost impossible. It's really cumbersome. But if you can
Yeah.
use software to do some of this stuff for you, and then you can go in and almost covertly, you can go in and essentially get recommended almost covertly in these groups. Yeah, strategies like that are real fun to talk. They're real fun to implement.
Yeah,
And
that's
very few
interesting.
painting companies know about that stuff.
In Facebook specifically, that engagement within those communities has been difficult.
Yeah. But you don't want to just come in and be like, oh, I'm a painting company, hire me. Right. That's a huge turnoff. And you'll probably just get removed from the group anyways.
Yeah, if you spam it. You know, like EOS and Traction start with why. I followed them to a T. Every word that it said, I tried to implement and do exactly like those books said. They ask you answer. There's a component of it that I have not been able to fully implement out of fear. Uh, but I feel like it's worth sharing that Marcus, he owned a pool company. That was his business. So he went into homes and he built pools. He sold in-ground pools to clients. And he shares this story about how his early on in his career, when he first started his pool company, he had something like a 15 to 20% closing ratio. So 15, one out of 7 of his clients would say yes. And
I don't know
then
the pool installation industry very well, but that it doesn't seem super high.
no, but at the same time,
They're big ticket jobs though.
you're selling a $50,000 pool.
Yeah, they're big ticket.
It's not a $5,000 paint job.
Yeah.
And he was working his tail off, doing as many estimates as he could, working 60, 70 hours a week, trying to get in front of clients and winning a small amount of them. And then he developed his inbound marketing strategy and he put together an ebook. And this ebook was a requirement that every person had to read prior to him going out to give them an estimate. There's some 25-page book about all the questions that you should ask before you buy a pool.
So it's a assignment based selling essentially.
100%.
Establishing himself as the expert prior to showing up.
Yep. And he said after writing the book that when he forced somebody to consume the content prior to him giving them an estimate, his closing ratio went up to something like 85% by reading it. And he did 1 year where he didn't make it mandatory to read the book. And on the people who didn't read the book, he had something like a 7% closing ratio. And the people who did, it was somewhere up north of 80%. Well, obviously you hear that and you say, well, I don't have a ton of estimators. Our appointments are valuable. Maybe we make them complete an assignment before doing an appointment. We have not implemented that component.
Because some of the people are not going to do it, and you have to follow through. If you're making it mandatory, you have to remove them from your calendar. You can't say it's mandatory and it's not mandatory, because now you're already establishing your company that you lack integrity, that you don't actually do what you say you're going to do.
Yeah. Are you familiar with? Have you read? They Ask You Answer.
I have, but it was a couple of years ago.
Okay. It's interesting, I think the latest Google update, is it called, the friendly helper?
Yeah, it's there's EEAT now. There's a major algorithm update recently that added to that. Google's constantly updating, so their algorithm, updates hundreds of times a year, but then they have these major ones, right? And so if people listening, if you've seen a shift in your rankings, if you've seen them drop, go up, whatever, a lot of it now is really related to that helpful content on your site.
And what was it called? The EEAT?
EEAT. Yeah. So now it's very focused on making sure that the content you're putting out is relevant, right? So exactly what you're talking about, that they ask you answer. Are you answering questions that people care about? Are you putting out content that's value add? What Google's always trying to do, and what these algorithm updates are often based around, is adding value to their user base, because that's how they make money. They make money on Google ads, right? How do they make money on Google ads? They make money on Google ads by people using Google as the premier search engine. It's just default in our head. I could find myself falling into it, thinking Google's like just permanent. Oh, you use Google. You're always going to use Google. It's forever. But imagine if Google started delivering horrendous results. That's like the easiest way to think about it. Imagine if Google, you're searching for a painting company and they're putting, they're just showing you a bunch of plumbers. Eventually you're going to be like, yeah, Google sucks. Like, it's just what totally, or they recommend, right? That's SEO, kind of quote, recommend these painting companies because they're at the top of Google. And every time you engage with one of these companies you're finding through Google, you have a horrendous result. Well, eventually you're going to be like, yeah, Google is not very good. They don't. So their whole thing is they need to actually add value to their free user base, the free value, because the more and more eyeballs and usage they get, the higher prices they can sell the pay-per-click for, which is really where they're monitoring their search engine.
As that update was described to me, I said, wow, Marcus wrote about this 10 years ago and said,
Yeah,
this is
you've been doing it.
what you're supposed to do. It's what we've outlined our website to be about. And then Google does a primary update that says, we're going to 100% focus on relevant and useful content and websites that are providing that for their clients.
Yeah, if you understand how Google makes money, if you understand what they are doing in the space, then you're already ahead of the curve, and you are already, essentially understanding that, because Google's a business. They're a business, and so their business is to add value so that people keep coming back to them, so that they can then sell them ads.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's there's a little more complexity to it, but that's basically what it is. They're an ad selling search engine. They sell ads.
Yeah. When you meet with somebody on the marketing world, do you give them an assignment at all prior to meeting with you?
So we do. It's not a 25-page PDF. We use a software called Typeform.
Yep.
So typeform.com, you can set up, I think we have about 10 questions there. And then we have them have to fill that out prior to meeting with us. It's labeled an assessment. Hey, take this assessment prior to meeting with us. We have some pre-qualifying questions that have to make sense, or else they're not even going to come on the calendar. So they get disqualified potentially. If they're on the calendar, they then have to move forward with this. Shows us that they're serious, and it also lets us know a lot more about their company, right? Because we're very partnership focused. We don't just push products down people's throats. So if they're not invested into us learning whether or not we're a fit and kind of what they need and actually crafting something for them, then we're not going to put them on the calendar, because it's just a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah. There's something magical in that assignment prior to the appointment. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but making sure that your homeowners have done something and putting some kind of barrier.
Well, they're invested. You have essentially it's a sunk cost, right? It might not be a financial one, but now it's a time one. So now they've invested into your company already. If they don't move forward, it can feel like a loss.
Which, that fear of loss, they're trying to prevent.
People respond to pain. People do. They don't want to feel like they wasted their time.
One of my good friends, he owns a distillery, and they're going through a rebrand. And he was meeting with the designer, and there was this I also know the company who was working on this redesign for him. And he was getting frustrated because they wouldn't let him meet with the designer. I go to my buddy and I say, hey man, he really wants to meet with the designer here. Can you streamline this? And he goes, look, there's a 5-question questionnaire that he needs to answer. He has not submitted the questionnaire to meet with the designer. Oh, okay. So it's, again, using that assignment, making sure that you've done the homework before sitting down and wasting someone's time. And as when you own a painting company, every time that you meet with a client, you're making an investment into that client. You're taking an hour out of your day.
It's a big investment.
Yeah. And if you're meeting with that client and they block the time off, then you can't meet with another client. So making sure that each one of those appointments are the highest value that you can is valuable, it's meaningful, and it's what Marcus talks about in They Ask You Answer. It's making sure that you're getting the most out of every appointment you go to.
Yep. Yeah. Worst scenario, worse than not having the lead, is going out and having it be a bad lead, because now it's a net negative. You've wasted your time. You've paid for it, a net negative. All right, man, I was worried we weren't going to get through all this stuff, or that we weren't going to fill up the hour. We are more than filling up the hour. So I want to get on to the fourth book. Yeah, I guess the 4th/5th, because I know we talked about the Start With Why and also Find Your Why. But let's get into this last book.
Yeah. So The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. This is a new book for me personally. I was just introduced to it 2 months ago, and I've listened to it 3 times. I've started to read it, and I've given it to 4 people on our leadership team. I've gotten the same degree of excitement that I got when I read Gino's book Traction for, wow, I need to implement and roll this out in every way possible. The great game of business is about open book management. It's about teaching people the financial literacy to run a business. It's teaching people, one, how to understand a profit and loss statement.
Yep.
What are you spending money on? What are you making as a business? And then two, teaching people about a balance sheet. What's an asset and what's a liability? How much money do you have as a business? How strong and how secure are you? And this came from a gentleman on one of my men's groups that he recommended it when I had expressed some financial stresses that we were going through as a business. As a lot of people know, spending habits may have changed slightly towards the end of last year when you start talking about a recession and when the stock market starts going down. And
That's when people just throw money at paint jobs. Doesn't even matter anymore.
They often want to buy the most expensive options at that point.
That's what. Yep. Price insensitive.
In starting August, September last year, we could feel people not wanting to buy the same way they had been buying leading up to it. And it impacted our business over the winter, undeniably. And I had somebody recommend I read this book for my team to really start to understand what we were doing as a company, why we were doing it, where we currently sat. And basically what Jack talks about in this book is that if people don't know the rules to the game, if they don't know the game, if they don't know the outcome of the game, they're not going to play it successfully. And in order for people to know, you've got to teach them. In our business, we spend money on 5 things: payroll, painters, materials. I give it to you.
I'm going to take all of it, Michael.
In marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Then everything else is like very little.
Yeah. Some like software and stuff like that.
90% of the business is gone, or 90% of the money that you make is gone by paying 4 people: payroll, subcontractors, materials, and marketing. That's almost the whole thing. And starting to educate people on what that means and how important 2 percentage points means on a gross margin. What does 1 gallon of paint equal if you bought an extra gallon on that job? Well, a gallon of a $70 a gallon paint is 1 percentage point off a $7,000 job. What's 1 percentage point over the course of a year? It's incredible. And Jack talks about opening up your books and sharing those with people on the team, assigning people numbers, giving ownership around the budgets, and tying everyone's incentives back to the profitability of the business, which is what I thought was so exciting. As a business owner, I think it's really easy for you to think that, I have to give carrots for every single KPI imaginable. I look at these comp plans that I've written for a sales manager, and you're like, whoa, I'm paying you off average job size, gross margin, revenue booked. There was 7 bonus opportunities for a sales manager. And maybe that was a little too complex. Maybe it should have just been, did the business make money? Then you made money.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason Paris actually talks a lot about this, which is pretty neat. When people come in and they say, hey, I want a raise, or I think you should get a raise. I says, great. I would love to make that happen for you. So let's sit down, let's run through the numbers, and let's figure out with this raise, how are we going to keep the profit margin? How are you driving the value? and actually giving them a real way to do it, right? Don't like be condescending or jerk about it, but like, how can we add the value here to actually make it make sense? Because I would really like to do that for you. And then what you're doing is you're basically, everyone can get as many raises as possible, right? If they can find the way to add the value, which oftentimes rock stars they can't, but it kind of flips it, and it's not the big mean boss. I like, no, you don't get a raise, or the boss, oh, he's so nice, he gave me a raise. Let's problem solve this thing together. Let's recognize that we're all on the same team. The goal is we need to hit this certain profit margin to have a healthy company, and let's collaborate together on what we can do to get you that raise.
Yeah. It's, extending the ownership of the business to the people that are working there.
Yeah.
And in order for that to make meaning, they have to understand their numbers. And they have to understand it so well. Where you can say, okay, if you can increase the referral rate on your projects by 5%, meaning 1 out of 20 people gives you another referral, that makes the company X.
Yeah.
And everyone knows referrals close better.
Way better. Yep.
They convert better.
Should close them all day for healthy profit margins.
And they tend to be more profitable.
Yep.
Don't know why, but they do, because the client already has trust with you. So they're not fighting you every step of the way. So how do we get more referrals? How do you incentivize people to do that? It's been an exciting book for the last several months as we're starting to roll this out and restructure our bonus plans completely from what Jack gives in his book. So that's 100% where we're moving our compensation model to, is to fit the great game of business. And I think there's something beautiful when you read 2 books. And this is something my wife worries about is, oh no, Michael, you just read this book. What's everyone going to have to do?
What's the fallout going to be?
How you're going to make everyone go above and beyond and do these things. And I said, no, it actually pairs perfectly with what we're doing. And Traction and the great game of business touch perfectly with one another, and they fit together. It was kind of like a missing component to Traction was the compensation piece, which I was missing for my key members.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. Yeah, well, I read The Great Game of Business about 6 years ago, as a CFO, because the software company I was working for had hired a consultant to come in and had the whole leadership team read it. But I haven't thought about it in some time. Haven't implemented it for Painter Marketing Pro. So now I'm going to reread it and probably pair it, with Traction.
It's I found that they kind of like fit hand in hand there. And it's incredible when you find those pieces and they just show up and you're like, whoa, that's what I was missing. It makes sense right now. So yeah. Hopefully there's some value within those books, and it can make an impact on somebody's business the same way it did ours.
For sure, man. So we just spent over an hour talking about 4 books, super in-depth, meaningful books. Man, thanks for sharing all that. I definitely, when we first talked about this episode, I really did think it was going to go a different direction, but I much prefer the direction that it went. Not just, hey, read these 30 books and feel good about yourself. Not to belittle reading. It's important. It's a great step, but also make sure you pick some Bibles of business. As you say, make sure you pick some that are really, really going to move the needle and lean into those books and actually act on those books.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up this second episode?
Feels very much like what we were talking about yesterday or last week. Mm-hmm. It's just recognizing that other people have already figured this out.
Yep.
And trying to pay attention to those people. So, and the 4 authors that we talked about are pretty special people who have figured it out. So,
yeah, I give you a hard time for being arrogant because you're the opposite of that. So you have this ultra successful painting company. Your goal, I think you said it's 14 million this year. For a lot of people, these are kind of mind-blowing numbers. And almost every single thing you're saying is, oh, well, the board recommended this. Oh, well, this person recommended this. Oh, I heard it from it's never like, oh, I'm so smart that I just came up with all these ideas. Everything you're saying essentially is something you learned or your network showed you, or you're leaning on standing on the shoulders of giants. right? As the saying goes, you're learning from people who have come before you and who are farther ahead than you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just people who in the professional network maybe aren't even farther ahead than you are, but they still have value to share. And they're coming from different industries and they're making you see things differently. So that collaboration.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you, man. Thank you. This was an amazing episode. I cannot wait for the next one. I think it sounds like the next one we are going to be diving into employees. So that'll pair pretty well. I think we set this thing up pretty well, man. I like the series, the way that the series is flowing.
Hopefully it wraps up well.
I'm sure it will. Yeah, we're not gonna let episode 5 be too much of a downer. I know we're gonna get into some of the hardships of the business, but we're gonna also get into solving those and kicking butt.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Brandon, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast. Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.